Yesterday was part 1 of Brand Me, an interactive personal branding experience. I took a Full Sail student named Andrea and branded her on stage, start to finish, live on stage, to show you how easy and quickly you can do this for yourself. Today, that's part 2. I'll answer your burning questions about branding and social media to help you create a powerful personal brand and get ahead of the competition. Get those questions ready. Send me a tweet or a DM on Instagram @PhilPallen, and I'll do my best to answer it live today. Let's have some fun, shall we? Hello. Back yet again for more. I'm so impressed. I said this the first day. I'm going to say it today, the final day. There are a lot of places you could be right now. And the fact that you decided to be here with me in this room or in this virtual room, I appreciate that. It really means the world to me. Today is all about you. I love that so many of you have followed this journey this week of branding. I have to actually credit Full Sail with this idea. They came to me and they said, I know, with branding Hall of Famers for the last few years, they said, what about doing a student? I was like, that's a really good idea. Yesterday, you saw in the little clip, we branded Andrea. How amazing was she? So awesome on stage and willing to, be a part of my experiment. So can you give her a round of applause again for being so awesome? Now, I know, again, we're going to put my social media handle, and I'm going to remind you where you can find what I created for you, which was my Full Sail grad branding playbook. And this has my 5 actionable tips as it relates to positioning, photography, brand identity, and your website. Those are all the things I need you thinking about today, tomorrow, right up until when you graduate and beyond. I'm not just thinking about graduation. This came up as a theme yesterday as well. Yes, final project and schoolwork is important, but at the same time, you are building your brands now, which is not just here on campus, right? And we have so many people and resources that are here to help you, not just while you're here at Full Sail, but beyond. Some of my best friends are some of my instructors from, I hate to admit, almost 10 years ago when I was here. These people I go on trips with. I call in the middle of the night when I need help with something. Like this place is a family. And so I'm reminding you that this lives beyond just the time that you are here enrolled as a student. Okay, I know why you're here. Part of why you're here, at least to kick things off, is to see the reveal of what we worked on together, right? So I'm happy to say Andrea's website, and a shout out to my team that worked very, very hard, not just on helping me deliver my client this website overnight. So that's Lauren, that's Shay, that's Javi, everyone that helped me pull this together. Thank you. And finally, your website is live. So if you've got your phone or your laptop, you can go check it out. It's andreasname.me. We couldn't get the .com. It wasn't available. This will come up likely as a question today. What happens if you can't get your .com if it's already taken? It involves some creativity with your top-level domain. So I'm actually going to exit out of my presentation here, and I'm going to pull up the actual website, and let's take a little look. I'm going to scroll through, show you some of the decisions. I don't think anything is going to shock you. Another thing here is that I literally set a timer for 1 hour, and I thought I'm going to just work on this with my team to pull what we can do together in an hour. Now listen to me. I make a lot of these in my job because that's my job. So it takes me probably a little bit less time. But if I can pull something like this together in an hour, it's not going to take you much longer. The whole point of this exercise, the reason we did this year, was to remind you that you don't have to overthink this. You don't need a logo right now. If you've got a friend who's a good designer, or maybe you want to take a stab at designing your own, great. But for now, to be practical, put your name in a great font and call it a day. The person you should be hiring or doing a favor for, if it's a friend, is a good photographer. Look at the impact good photography has on the final product. I consider the website to be that final result, right, where all of the elements come together. Good copy that we hear in conversation when we're exploring the positioning of a brand. Photography, which inspires color. Typography is something, and even colors can evolve and change as your brand evolves. But I often think of this, honestly, branding is a fluid process, right? The decisions you make today are not going to represent everything moving forward, right? There's flexibility for this to change and evolve as you change and evolve in real life. Branding is recreating the in-person experience. What is it that makes you great? How can we communicate that online? I love this website. I hope you do too. What do you think? Andre, I almost put the before photo in there again. Just kidding. I didn't do it. Yeah, see, if you could only see the glare she's giving me. Today is all about you. So I have gathered a few questions. We're going to start with Danny. A few questions from you guys, from Full Sail students and Full Sail grads, recent grads and alumni. So get those of you in the room, and actually online as well. I've got my phone with me, so you can actually just send me a tweet or a DM, and I'm here. We're here together very casually over the next few minutes so that I can be a resource to you. Let's start with Danny, who has a question for me. And you guys in the room, get thinking about what you want to ask and how I can help you, and we'll run a mic around the room.
Hey there, Phil. I see you traveling all over the place, and I was just wondering, what does it cost to be able to go on these trips? And to follow up, what makes it worth to visit all these amazing places? Is it the experiences or the people you meet?
I love this question. It's actually not even really branding related. However, I want to talk about my life and actually how my time studying at Full Sail has lent itself to a job that I can do remotely. In my final months of Full Sail, it occurred to me, unlike my friends in other degree programs, where they might be more tied to one particular place or one particular market, that I could literally do my work with my laptop or my phone. And so as an international student, I had to stay in the US for the first few years to figure out all my immigration stuff. But once I realized that actually no one cares where I am, as long as I get my work done, so I get paid, that meant I could go anywhere. So I started to travel about 2, 3, 4 years ago. And Danny's asking, how much does it cost? Which is a perfectly valid question. I spend less money now than when I lived in LA. So I set a budget for myself. I try and keep it under what I used to pay in LA, which was roughly $2,000 a month for an apartment. My budget is significantly less now to allow for me to also spend time in more expensive places. So anyone who knows me knows that I love Latin America, for example. The cost of living is lower in countries like Colombia and Mexico, and I just love being there. Brazil. Those are places I've been recently. So it costs me less to travel, even including flights. It costs me less to travel than it did when I lived in LA. I would say my average budget is like between $1,200 and $2,000 per month, which is impossible to find an apartment in LA. So that's how much I spend on rent, and then everything else is generally relative to that. I'm in Mexico right now, which I love because the cost of living is lower and I'm able to work remotely, so I'm still earning in US dollars. It allows me to save money to go to more expensive countries when I want, like Sweden, Norway, Iceland. Those are very expensive countries. London is an expensive city. So I budget to be able to know that I have to spend more money in those places when I go. So that's a little bit about like how much money I spend. One more thing I'll add to this question from Danny. I enjoy being in places that cost less money to live because actually I don't have to work as much. I told the story on day one of when I worked with Campbell's as a client, and I started to work with corporations, and I started to hire full sale students to help me deliver creative projects, and I discovered that it cost a lot of money to make more money and a lot of additional adult responsibilities. And so I'm kind of in a zone right now where I'm enjoying scaling down. Everyone talks about scaling up, right? For me, I'm scaling down, simplifying my life, and eating a lot of tacos. So it's a great question. I'm glad that Danny submitted that. It's like not really branding related, but it has a big part. It has to do with a big part of my life. And the fact that I had control to choose a job coming out of Full Sail. Let me correct that. Not choose a job, create a job. Thank you very much. Using what I learned here on campus to be able to create opportunities for myself. So let's start the Q&A. We can run a microphone around here. Who has a question for me? I can't see you very well because the lighting is so good in here, but it means I can't. There we go. Oh my God, there's lights on you. Great.
Hi.
Hi.
So now that Andrea has her website, how does she know where to go from there? What's the next step? Basically, what questions should she be asking herself to decide the next step?
Great question. One of the things that I taught you first yesterday was the process in which I approach all of this. The process I use is universal regardless of details of what it is you do, because I think we all need a process to follow to know where to go next, right? If you're standing there and there are 100 doors that you can walk through, which one are you going to walk through? Probably none of them. So I'm a big fan of having a process, creating rules, parameters for you to follow, to know where you need to go next. So I think about what I taught you, this process: position your brand, build something to show for it. Check that off today. The website is kind of the final stage of the build. What I would also include with that stage would be updating your social media profiles. So in addition to me sharing Andrea's website, which you can go to, it's live right now, Andrea also this morning, on her own accord, updated her profile photo on Instagram, as well as her Instagram handle. How cool is this? That on Instagram, you can use punctuation in your username. You can't do that on every social media website like Twitter, for example. So Andrea's social media handle on Instagram, it's exactly the same as her website. So it's Andrea Carvalho. Have you noticed I've tried to avoid saying your last name because I'm going to butcher it? Yeah. How'd I do? Yeah, I butchered it. First and last name .me was the top level domain that we used. And it's exactly the same as her website, so it reminds people where they can go to get more information on her every time she posts. So I would think about updating your social media handles, profile photos. It's not a bad idea to keep a list of all the places you show up online. You've got profiles that you may forget about, but if you just one time keep a list somewhere accessible so you can refer to that list once a year that you update your profile photo, or however often you update. Then we go to the final stage, which is promote. And I love getting to that stage. It feels like we can see the finish line, kind of, or it's almost like it's not really a finish line. You got to keep running after the race, right? You have to work every single day on promoting yourself and getting your brand in front of the right faces and eyeballs. So when we get to the promotion stage, I like for you to prioritize where you need to be. Instead of being average on 10 social media platforms, I'd rather you be a rock star on 3 or even a superstar on 1. I've taught that here for years, and I've added that caveat at the end, a superstar on 1, because really, there's only so many hours in the day, and if you can be really good at one platform and build your audience, that's better than just showing up. So think about the parameters that exist as you prioritize your next stage, the promotion. 2 parameters: time, how much time you have; goals. What are your business goals? So when I talk about being overwhelmed by 100 doors and not being sure which one to go through, remind yourself of your business goals. What is it you're trying to achieve? Branding is not just about looking pretty online. Branding is a business tool that you have available to you, right? You set some goals, you brand not only who you are today, but who you want to become, so that we start to verbalize that. We actually manifest some of these business goals by communicating that now. The final thing I'll say in response to this question is that you can't do everything, particularly those of us that are personal brands. There's only so many hours in the day. So decide where you enjoy creating content or showing up, being strategic, not just being a user of social media, but being a marketer on social media. Where do you enjoy creating, and where is your audience? Those are the 2 things that matter, as well as the parameters I mentioned, your business goals, and realistically, how much time you have to build your brand. I'm going to throw back to my slides here and have a question from Sandy.
Hi, Phil. So my question to you is that you've always said to brand for not who you are right now, but for who you want to become. What would you suggest to an individual who's straight out of college, just like myself, and who's still trying to figure out what direction to go or choose to start to build a brand that can help further themselves? Thank you.
That is such a good question, and I love that I just said that, and then she repeated it. That's branding. We're not just branding who you are today. We are branding who you are going to become. We're going to start to use the language, and through visuals, we're going to start to show who you are, right? Question came up yesterday about a portfolio. How do you show proof of concept if you don't have any projects yet? I'm sure we'll talk about that again today. But I like to inject some creativity into that strategy. Some distraction from the fact that you might not have projects, but you do have capabilities. You have ideas. Even if it's not a project you did for a client, then make something up so that we can see what you're capable of creating. To Sandy's question, she's a bit overwhelmed because her brand is quickly evolving. And in fact, she's still discovering what it is she loves to do and where that fits with a need. I have to give a shout out to a friend and a student, Brandon, who I just saw in the hallway about 10 minutes ago. And he was just telling me about how he has pivoted from pursuing a career in pop music to now going even more niche. I think he said working with soundtracks. Because he said to me laughingly, but serious, he said, and I'm finally getting paid for this work. And I could not be happier. I'm so happy about this, and I'm mentioning it on stage, because that is a perfect example of, first of all, accepting that branding is fluid, it's evolving, it's not static. But not only are you listening to yourself, your goals, your passions, what it is you love to do, but more importantly, you are pairing that passion with something others need and are willing to spend money on. I stress this because I want you all set up for success. I don't want it to be difficult for you to sell yourself, to market yourself. I want it to be easy. I want your audience to find you and completely identify themselves in what you offer. And that's why I'm a big fan of accepting the fact that your brand is going to evolve, but also finding a very specific audience that you can target. Right? When you try to be everything to everyone, you effectively appeal to no one. So how can we start to use specific language for the types of projects that you want to work on? Choose a niche. Choose a specific audience. It doesn't mean that people not in that audience are not going to take interest in what you're doing. In fact, they're going to like the fact that you confidently say, this is who I am, this is who I help, this is why you should care. My advice to Sani, my advice to you, if you're still discovering your brand, remember my voice in your head saying, great, this is Phil giving you permission to keep discovering, trying, experimenting, researching by having conversations with people that are out there doing it, doing interesting things. Discover your passions and be completely open to figuring out what's next for you. Research is a scary word, right? Research is a scary word. I mean, we don't want to do it, but actually research is just as simple as having a conversation with someone to learn and become more informed. I say, like, don't ask your friends and your family if they like a product or the service. They might be afraid to hurt your feelings. Go to a dog park and talk to a stranger. Is this something you would use? Is this something you would buy? Talk to someone who doesn't know anything about you to get a more accurate, informed perspective. Constantly be in a state where you are discovering what it is you love to do, and be curious to observe examples or instances of proof of concept, instances where people are successful in what they do. That should give you ideas on how you're not going to copy anyone, but you can be strongly inspired to kind of craft your own thing. Next question.
Hi.
Hey.
So my question is, it's a bit simple. It's more Instagram related.
Great.
What would you say is the optimal amount of times to post in a single, say, day, specifically on like your feed and your story? And if you can like focus the question on like a musical creative, like a producer, for instance, that would be great.
Great.
Yeah.
I love this question. Figuring out when to post on social media is what I would call a champagne problem. Now go with me on this. It matters less than you think it does. What I care more about than when you post on social media is that you do post on social media almost every day. If you are active, we're talking specifically about Instagram, if you are active on all 4 verticals of Instagram, then you get to worry about which champagne you're going to drink. Then you get to worry about when to post. When you post on social media doesn't really matter in comparison to making sure you show up consistently on all 4 verticals of the platform. What are the 4 verticals of the platform? Feed, which are the photos, videos, whatever goes on your feed. That was how Instagram started. Not just individually the photo, but now, 2020, people are very savvy. It's how those photos all interact with one another, almost like a mood board. That has a big impact on whether someone follows you or not, right? Is whether or not they look like they're getting value from what it is you post, and everything should look good together. Feed, stories. There are many users on Instagram that primarily consume content from stories and not feed. Stories are huge. And there are some cool things that you can do, as simple as pushing a feed post that you just posted to your stories so to ensure people see it. You can get creative, but actually Instagram has been very smart with how they've grown because they're effectively 4 social media platforms, and it's a lot of work to be good on all 4. Feed, stories, live. Number 3, Instagram Live. Let's do an experiment. By a show of hands of those of you in the room, how many of you are actively posting Instagram feed posts? At least once a week, let's say. Great. Keep your hand up if you post at least 1 or 2 stories per week. Keep your hand up if you go live at least once a week. There are no hands in the room. There's 1 hand in the room, yes. Andrea goes live because I told her to go live. In fact, I don't even go live once a week. I can't even put my hand up. Talk about hypocrite. Still to this day, every follower you have will get notified that you are live. Or if you go live with a guest, then their followers get notified. So if you have any like famous, Instagram famous friends, convince them into going live with you because their followers will discover you. And how much does it cost to send a push notification to your follower that you're live? Nothing. On every other social media platform, we pay for that kind of reach. So I am super passionate about making sure people go live. I need to do a better job of this myself. So that's the that's the third. The fourth is IGTV, the final vertical of Instagram. This is the newer one. There are still people unsure of this platform. But Instagram, I can tell you, Instagram loves this platform themselves. They want it to be successful. So I think it's a good idea to be active on IGTV, which is over 1 minute length vertical video, is what it's intended. It doesn't have to be vertical, what you post, but ideally it fills up all of the screen real estate. I care more that you are active on all 4 verticals than what time you post. With algorithm changes, I think what time you post matters less. Choose a time, do an experiment, choose a time, and post at that time every day for a week. Then, if you have a business or a creator account, you have access to analytics, we can see which day is best in terms of engagement, activity, which days of the week are best for you. The only way we're going to know that is if you post every day for a week, because Instagram will still today, they'll suggest to you, your followers are most active on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But that's actually not an accurate read if you haven't posted every day, because it's only going to tell you your followers are most active on the days that you posted. So you got to do it every day for a week. Post at the same time, so that variable shouldn't change. And then, once we know which days are our best days, then you can start to experiment with different times. But actually, you're going to know the answer to that question better than I'm going to know, because I don't know your followers or your audience as well as you know your followers or audience. In your analytics, have a look at your top cities and your top countries and think about the time zones that those people are in general, and there are lots of articles about this. One of my favorite blogs about Instagram is Later. It's an app, the scheduling app. I actually love the blog. I think their blog posts are amazing. But they did, for example, a study using millions of accounts and lots of data to give you general tips on when is the best time to post. But I think you know your audience better than anyone. So think about first priority being active on all 4, then worry about the champagne problem of when to post. And when you're ready for that, you can use the exact same kind of experiment structure that I gave you. Great question. I'm going to throw back to my slides. Let's see this next question.
Hey, Phil. If you were branding an executive or a tech executive, what are ways that you would test out brand perception?
Ooh, now the questions are getting more advanced. I like this. How do you test brand perception? I'm going to keep this answer pretty short because I've talked a little bit about this already. Research is the answer, but not overthinking the heaviness of this word, asking for input, asking people's opinion. Sometimes people forget to include in their strategy that they should be talking to their audience to find out what they want. When we're working on my own content strategy, and if we're not sure about something, we even remind ourselves, well, if we're not sure, then let's ask what people want. Some of you follow me on Instagram. All of you should be following me on Instagram. And you see that I ask you for input. Do you like this or do you like this? What is the next thing you want me to talk about? Some of you have come up to me in the hallway with great questions. And what did I tell you to do? I said, that's a great question. I need you to send me a vertical video of you asking me that question so I can not only put it in my slides today, but I use this to create content in the future. I'm sorry, but that's a good idea. Now I have a whole pool of great questions from you that inform the content that I create myself for you and for my audience. So, don't get too heavy into strategy or brand perception or any of these big words. When you're not sure about something, don't be afraid to ask your audience. Your audience loves to give input. They love to be heard, right? So it's as simple as asking them questions. I love Instagram stories for that feature, the ability to post out an interactive element called a sticker as a question, a poll. There's all kinds of cool features that you can use to collect data from people that can inform your strategy. Next question.
Hey, Phil. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. So my question is more specific. I think I mentioned to you that I started a podcast. It's in Spanish, but considering people that ask me to do it in English, I might do bilingual. And I have an Instagram account in Spanish. So my question is, should I do another one in English, or should I make this one in like bilingual, just post the same content, try to translate it? And the second question, the follow-up is, what do you think of promotion on LinkedIn? Not just promotion, but like constantly posting on LinkedIn, because I follow Gary Vee and he always talks about it, that it's kind of organic right now.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that?
Okay,
Both
great.
questions.
So 2 questions, both good questions. The first has to do with languages. This is actually one of the more difficult things to answer. I think that it's tricky because there's no exact blueprint to handle multi-languages. That's how I'll answer it first. Truly, one of the bigger challenges in my work is but I love it. I love working, obviously, in other countries and with talent in all different kinds of places. But it is tricky to navigate when we're juggling 2 languages because, I'm a huge fan of consolidating when possible. If we can avoid having 2 Instagram handles, let's avoid it and just have one. I'd rather you be really good at one thing, even if in that one thing it has 2 languages. So I'm still tempted to say no, don't have multiple accounts. However, there might be instances where it is a good idea to have English, Spanish. Whenever I'm not sure about something, I think, well, who else would also have or face this challenge? This is one that I actually thought about a few months ago for a client I was working on, and I thought, okay, we've got English and we've got Portuguese. In your case, we've got English and Spanish, and also potentially Portuguese. How do we juggle it? Who else has to juggle multi-languages? World leaders. So I looked at the Instagram account of the Prime Minister of Canada, because legally everything must be in English and French. The Prime Minister of Canada has one Instagram account, but every caption is translated into both languages. You know who else does that? Celine Dion. And I'm pretty embarrassed to admit that I follow her on Instagram, but I love her. She also puts everything in French and in English. And I think I'm still tempted to say have one of everything, but balance the translation as and when you can, particularly a platform like Instagram. I know we're talking about blogging, but still Instagram is so visual that if you can keep the visual about the visual, almost like an IKEA manual where there's no words. That's why they do that, by the way. We all know what an IKEA manual looks like, and there are no words intentionally. So that can go out to as many countries have IKEA, many. I think about the same thing. Keep your visuals very visual, and then in the space of text, I would put them in both languages. Your second question is about LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn right now. I believe that people right now are using LinkedIn like how we used to use Facebook years ago. Back when we enjoyed using Facebook, I don't enjoy Facebook anymore, and I know that's felt by a lot of people. What's really cool about LinkedIn right now is that the algorithm is different than other social media platforms, and your content lives longer. When you think, really put some thought into a good post that your audience might respond well to. We don't know what they're going to respond to. But when we create something good for LinkedIn, you can get likes and comments on that post like weeks later. No other platform has content that will live that long. Facebook, especially Instagram, like no one is looking at your Instagram from a week ago, unless they're thinking about dating you and they're scrolling back and it's a beach photo. I'm not wrong. So that's what I love about LinkedIn. And I post once a week on LinkedIn, but I put a lot of thought into that post to make sure it's useful for people. And I love that it gets more eyeballs than anything else, if it's something that resonates with my audience. And so, honestly, one piece of content on LinkedIn gets action like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, sometimes a month later, just from one single piece of content. And that excites me about LinkedIn. So I would say, if I had to suggest, I'd say start with one post a week on LinkedIn, but put a lot of thought into it. Almost like a mini blog post. Seems to work really well for me. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, make sure we are, and become a savvy marketer, and don't just consume what I share with you, deconstruct it. Try and figure out, what is he doing so I can go rip him off? I'm encouraging you to do that. Great questions. I'm going to throw back to my slides for another question.
Hey, Phil. I wanted to ask, should all my social media look different, or should they all have the same feel? Thank you.
Great question, Greg. Should all my social media have the same feel? Yes. Yes. I think that you should use the same profile photo on every single social media platform. If possible, it should be cropped in close to your face, because the way that your profile photo is served most to people is really small beside whatever post that you send out. So normally your face is really super small. And so it should be cropped in pretty close to your face. I get bored with my profile photo after a year of having the same one. So I allow myself to update it once a year. And that works well but there are people that disagree with me on that, by the way. There are people that say you should never change your profile photo. The longer you have it, the more you're building brand equity for yourself, the value, right? People come to just associate that image with you. But honestly, I get bored. I don't want the same photo after a year. So for me, I change it once a year, but I make sure it is consistent on all social media platforms. The cover photos that I have on sites are a little bit different. Some are trickier to design than others. YouTube is very difficult to design. Platforms like Canva allow you to work within templates that they've created for you. I'm a big fan of Canva. So you can switch up the vibe on the platforms depending on what screen real estate you have to work with, but I do think your profile photo should be the same on every single platform. Let's also talk about your social media bio. Yesterday on stage, and you'll see it on Andrea's one-page site, that we start today and we continue to workshop and tweak and build out over the coming days and weeks. And your brand sentence is a good starting point for figuring out what your social media bio should say. It doesn't have to be exactly the same on all social media platforms. In fact, I think that you can slightly tweak it so that it's interesting. If we say the same thing on every social media platform, even with content, if you say the same thing, post the same thing at the same time, without even doing it on purpose, it speaks down to your audience, right? Like if I consume you on Instagram and then I go to Facebook and I see the exact same thing, that's not riveting or exciting to me. I've already seen it. It's kind of assuming that I'm not savvy enough to follow you on all those platforms. If I'm getting the same thing all the time, I don't want it. You know, whereas if you take three extra seconds to slightly reposition the content, even just change one sentence, then that's received better from your audience. But in terms of visuals, I would say keep them pretty consistent, especially your profile photo. Next question.
Hey Phil.
Hey.
How are you doing? So you talk a lot about visuals and how important it is to like have a mood board kind of on Instagram. So I see that in a lot of your clients, you hire like professional photographers to take the pictures of them. So do you recommend on investing on buying like a professional camera for our feed on Instagram and our posts instead of using our phone to have like a consistent like resolution on every picture?
That is a great question. Should you invest in a camera? Should you learn photography if you don't know it yet? I mean, it's never going to hurt. It's never going to hurt to have photography skills because social media has become so visual, and it's become a really high expectation of visual quality. And if anyone gets this, it's like young people and teenagers and kids. It's like they've grown up with phones, and they know how to take great photos, and it makes a difference. Because everyone is so active, you need good visuals to stand out, and it's a huge part of perception online. Now, I will be the first to admit that I am a terrible photographer. So for me, I don't post a lot of pictures that I take myself. I'm organized, and I have lots of friends, and I hire photographers in a lot of the cities I go, and I spend time. So that I have assets that I can create. For me, it makes sense to hire a photographer to get good visuals since my brand has to be branding. My stuff needs to look good. So for me, it's a good investment to work with photographers, to pay and hire photographers to get what I need. But I'll tell you, I'm very organized before I go work with a photographer. I like to be able to tell I like to tell them specifically, you know, I've got a course coming up, I've got blog posts. Sometimes I even know the titles, you know, so be as organized as you can be. If you think you can become a good photographer, then buy a camera. I am never going to become a good photographer. So I just work with people that I trust to help me deliver. But there are also ways, if you have a look at my Instagram feed, you'll see that it's possible to also post photos that aren't perfect. If you have a brand color, sometimes I'll go in Canva and I'll make the background the brand color, and I'll put the low quality photo on top of it, crop it, make almost like a little collage, or I'll do a slide over. So that if the ugly picture, it's not the one you see on the feed, but it's the one you slide over to. I do that a lot. I did one recently where I was quoted in the Times talking about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and it's not going to be on brand for me to post like a screenshot of a website that I was mentioned on. So instead, I put a picture of me in England, and then the swipe over, if you look on my feed, you'll see this. It's a picture of me on a doorstep, and then you swipe over and you see the article. So I get creative with that, but I always think, and I always prioritize to stay on brand on my feed. Great question. Let's throw it back to my slides and keep plugging along here.
As a music professional who travels a professional touring rock band, a music production studio, and a full-time industry job, I've been struggling with gaining momentum for these projects, and two, that sustaining a fan base that stays engaged. As well to this, finding the right partners who see your vision and help you expand it.
Okay, so this is a big question. He's juggling a lot of things and wanting to continue keeping his audience engaged. This is a tricky one. I felt this challenge when I was going through my Charlie Sheen internship competition. How can I make it interesting or exciting for people to follow along, you know, without getting exhausted from hearing me talk about it every single day? You want to keep your audience engaged, and what you share needs to be something that they need. If what you're sharing is not something they need or is not of any value to them, they are going to quickly tune you out. It's exactly what you do. It's exactly what you do when an ad comes on the radio. You instantly just tune it out because we've become good at that because we're inundated with information every single day. So get creative with how you engage your audience. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. You know your audience better than me. Be consistent with your posts. Ask them what they want and think about their position. How can you give them value? After this, I'll take all these questions and I will store them in a folder. And the minute I question what is it I should post next week or write a blog post about, I'm going to open this folder and I'm going to look at your questions and I'm going to answer them. Because if you're wondering something, there's a good chance someone else is wondering it too. It's a great question.
Hey Phil, sometimes I get stuck and I don't have anything to post. I can go days without posting because I don't have any content. Do you have any tips on ways that I can repurpose existing content so I'm not going these long periods of time without posting?
Look at you in a little suit, Isaiah. So professional. This is a great question. I'm glad that he brought up this idea of repurposing. There's only so many hours in the day, so use your time strategically, right? Ideally, we get in the rhythm of everything not being one-to-one to one-to-one, because by the time you post on all your social media platforms, it's nighttime and you're ready for bed, you know, to wake up and do it all over again. I am a huge fan of storing all my content in one place, even though I have to put it in different places to schedule it, post it out. I have a Google Doc where I keep all of my ideas. Why do I do that? Because it's March and it's Hall of Fame week and I don't have a lot of time to create my own content. So I'm going to go back to January, copy a tweet that I wrote in January, slightly reposition it, post it out, done. That's thinking about repurposing. Or creating one form or one long form piece of content like a podcast or a video and being able to slice that up to be able to repurpose it and have micro content. Okay? So think about how you can create content that's not just one-to-one to one-to-one, but how can you take one thing and make it more than one? We're going to wrap up here. I'll have maybe one or two more questions. Sound good?
Hey, Phil. My name is Ethan Mark, and I'm a creative writing student here at Full Sail. I've been studying marketing for months now, and I found out that writers need to take a unique approach to this. We need to be able to market ourselves, we need to be able to market our names while selling our published works, if we have any. But as a novelist, even early on, I'm not going to have a lot to sell to my audience. So how do you get your audience involved on your page? And I guess if you have any helpful advice that could help us strengthen our marketing and our names, that would be awesome. And again, if we don't have anything to sell right away, then what's your advice for our marketing plan with nothing to sell? Thank you.
So we've talked a little bit about this, right? If we don't have a portfolio, then let's distract them with our capabilities, with our ideas, concepts, mock-ups. In his case, writing. Give me samples of what you're capable of creating. Proof of concept. If you have nothing to sell, then take us on the journey of creating whatever it is you're working on. Andrea's really excited about being able to let people into the process of creating your brand. You just had a post go out today or shortly about, you know, changes are coming and things are evolving. Nothing, you know, doesn't have to be perfect. Let people in on the process. Let people in on your brain, your ideas, your challenges. One of the content trends of 2020 is vulnerability or humility. The idea of actually creating content not out of everything being perfect, but actually when things go wrong. Because we're humans. Humans connect with humans. This is how it works. We are more likely to connect with you when things go wrong than when things go right. So think about that. If you have nothing to sell, that's no problem. Then let us in on the process of creating stuff, creating or thinking or going to job interviews, getting input. Let us in on that process. Now, there are a few questions I had lined up here that we didn't have time for today, but I can promise you that I will be answering this on my own content over the next few days, the next few weeks. Do me a favor and become friends with me if we're not friends yet online. I show up on Instagram a lot. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I want to give a shout out to those of you who've been tweeting the last few days. I see you. I see you, to the camera, because you're at home. But I want to thank you guys for being so enthusiastic and being so engaged with the fun that we've had over the last few days. It means so much to me that you have spent your valuable minutes with me here, engaged. And if you've learned one useful, tangible thing, then I have done my job. So give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you for being here. Use your valuable minutes to connect with Hall of Famers and grads and amazing people that are back on this campus, and have an amazing rest of your Hall of Fame.